You should stay home. A short sentence, cold, but enough to strangle 6 months of pregnancy and a lifetime of trust. Madison stood frozen in the middle of the 55th floor apartment, hand placed on her belly, watching her husband step out in a gleaming tuxedo from Milan, as if he himself were the city's work of art. On the table, the oak box was closed. Inside the necklace he once promised to give her, now handed to his mistress. All the dazzling lights around her chandeliers, glass, marble turned into a gilded cage. But amid the humiliation and emptiness, another fire flickered. And when she opened the bottom drawer, seeing the black business card with the name Alexander Knight, Madison understood. This was no longer Ethan's night. It was hers. Alright, before you settle in, take a sec to like the video and subscribe, but only if you're genuinely vibing with what I'm putting out here. And drop a comment below letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always a thrill to see who's joining us from all corners of the globe. The sunset faded behind Manhattan's skyline, casting a pale orange hue on the glass towers reaching for the sky. Inside the penthouse apartment, that light spilled across the marble floor, on the gleaming steel-clad columns, reflecting into winding golden streaks like temporary engravings. But Madison only felt cold. Each final ray of sunlight was no different from cold metal sliding across skin, unable to warm an empty heart. She stood a few steps from Ethan, her eyes fixed on his back. That back had once been her support, the place where she felt she belonged. Now, under the tuxedo freshly shipped from Milan, it carried a proud, almost arrogant silhouette. Ethan admired himself in the full-length mirror, tilting his head slightly, adjusting his tie like an actor preparing for a Broadway stage. In those smug eyes, New York was the audience, and he was the only star. Madison touched her pregnant belly, bending slightly to hide the tremor at the corner of her lips. 6 months of pregnancy had slowed her steps, made her breaths heavier. But it was Ethan's eyes that cut the deepest. They glanced over her as if she didn't exist. No more gentle looks, no more concern. Just the indifference of someone who had set her aside, like furniture no longer fitting the room. On the table, the oak box still lay there, tightly closed, containing the diamond necklace, a promise turned into proof of betrayal. Madison glanced at it, her lips trembling slightly. For years, she had stood behind Ethan, building his every step, laying the foundation for big deals, calculating small details so he could stride confidently through the elite world. He was the face, but she was the strategic mind. Yet now, as her body changed because of the little life in her belly, he only saw a burden. A dry, choked laugh escaped her throat. The sound echoed in the vast space, then quickly died out, as if ashamed of its own existence. If anyone filmed this scene, they would say it was a gilded cage, glamorous from the outside, but suffocating inside to the point of breathlessness. Ethan turned, his eyes glancing at her indifferently. "You should stay home. You don't fit tonight." His voice was light, but each word dropped like a sharp blade. Not harsh, not loud, the indifference was the heaviest verdict. Madison stiffened, memories flooding back like shattered glass. The day he held her hand at their wedding, vowing to do everything together. The day they planned Urban Rise, when she still dared to dream of a green city. All of it now just distant, stinging fragments. Madison stepped toward the towering window, her fingers lightly touching the cold glass. Below, the cars on Fifth Avenue glowed like bulging veins, the city still pushing forward. But in this apartment, time froze solid, forcing her to swallow each heavy heartbeat. The reflection in the glass made her hesitate for a moment. Around her face, a heavier body, but her eyes, they made her choke up. No more light that once flared every time Ethan smiled. Just hollow sockets weighed down by shadows. "Madison," Ethan called, his voice not waiting for a response. "I have to go." He strode forward, grabbed his phone, checked the time, then pulled the door open. The apartment sank back into silence. Only Madison remained by the window, hands still on her belly, listening to a gentle kick from the tiny life inside. Her heart tightened. She couldn't let the child grow up in a world where the mother was just a forgotten shadow. Dear audience, grab a glass of water, take a moment to relax, and keep listening to the story. The twists are still to come. And please drop a comment below letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always a joy to see who's joining us from around the world. Drop a 1 in the comments if you find this story gripping. so we can keep bringing you more captivating tales." She turned away, walked to the old wooden cabinet. The bottom drawer where she always avoided suddenly felt heavy, as if containing an untouched past. Her fingers pulled it out. Old papers, receipts, invitations piled up. And then, amid it all, something gleamed under the golden light. A glossy black business card, embossed with a single cold name, Alexander Knight. Madison slumped into the Italian armchair, the card trembling slightly in her hand. Her heart pounded, as if this small piece of metal was drawing back buried memories. Alexander Knight, the man dubbed the Ghost of Silicon Valley, the one who appeared at the moment her young career seemed about to crumble, and left a promise. "When you're ready to build the future, call me." She had never called. Pride and love for Ethan had held her back. But now, as everything she once trusted vanished like thin smoke, the card seemed to whisper. Another door was still there. Madison looked up, her eyes dry, but a slender spark gleamed in them. The question burst in her mind, harsh yet urging. If she dialed, which way would her life turn? The business card rested neatly in Madison's palm, cold as steel, yet radiating an indescribable weight. On the smooth black surface, the silver-embossed letters Alexander Knight stood out like fate's imprint. She took a deep breath, her fingers lightly tracing the edge, memories flooding like a waterfall. Many years ago, when Urban Rise was just a small team in a damp Brooklyn basement, Madison had stepped into the powerful room of the Knight Foundation. It was her only chance for funding. She remembered clearly the old projector beeping, then dying right at the opening slide. The entire PowerPoint vanished. Numbers, charts, plans all blank. In that moment, the room fell into cold silence. Her hands shook, but she straightened her back. Madison spoke, without slides, without images. She talked about a different New York where cracked neighborhoods could revive into parks, where gray concrete could give way to leafy green paths. She spoke with conviction, with heart. And then, the back door swung open. A tall man with silver-streaked hair, in a simple suit, entered. His eyes sharp, but not the scrutinizing kind usual in power rooms. It was a calm, commanding gaze, as if he could read every thought in the room. The board stood up in unison, a rare sign of respect. That was the first time Madison saw Alexander Knight, tech billionaire, the man the press called the Ghost of Silicon Valley, for his reclusiveness bordering on invisibility. He leaned against the doorframe, silently listening to her. No notes, no interruptions. When she finished, the board merely shook their heads coldly. Too risky, too far-fetched. But Alexander stepped forward, placing the black business card lightly on the table. "When you're ready to build the future, call." He left as quickly as he came, leaving the room buzzing behind. Madison had kept the card as a memento, but never called. She believed Ethan would build the dream with her. But now, with that faith shattered, the card re-emerged like a final escape. She stared at the embossed numbers. Her fingers trembled over the phone. A voice inside screamed, "Don't, he won't remember you." But her heart whispered, "If not for you, then for the baby." Madison breathed deeply, then dialed. The first ring echoed, her chest tightening. The second, she closed her eyes, gripping the chair arm tightly. The third panic surged. She nearly hung up, terrified of her own boldness. But then, a deep, warm voice broke through the void. "Madison." She froze. "No, who is this?" No hesitation, he remembered, as clearly as if the presentation had happened yesterday. "You." Her throat choked. Words stuck. Alexander cut in, his voice steady, concise. "I've been waiting. Be ready in 90 minutes. Tonight, we're not just attending a gala. We're making a statement." Then the line went dead. No explanation, no afterthought. Just a crisp command, like a knife opening a new chapter. Madison dropped the phone on the table, hands shaking. In her heart, a different beat rang out, not of fear, but of a reviving spark. But 90 minutes. Time that for many was just enough for a Netflix episode, but for her, could turn her life around. She wiped away the tear lingering at her eye corner. In the mirror, the reflection still blurred with pain. But somewhere in the corner of her eye, a light had just awakened. On the table, the black business card lay still, shimmering under the golden light. It was no longer a relic of an old day. It was the key unlocking a door she had never dared enter. Madison took a deep breath, placed her hand on her belly, whispering silently, "We're stepping into a night Ethan could never imagine." The 55th floor apartment sank into stillness, only the chandelier light casting down on the glossy wooden table. Madison sat motionless, her heart still pounding after the call. 90 minutes. The two words swirled in her head, making the space feel like it was counting down with her heartbeat. The doorbell rang. The unexpected sound echoed in the apartment too accustomed to silence. Madison startled, quickly wiping the remaining tear from her eye corner. She opened the door. 3 people stood there. No ostentation, no polite smiles. A neat woman with hair tied high, eyes sharp as knives, a stylist. Beside her, a makeup artist carrying a suitcase, her gaze surveying Madison's face like a living canvas. Behind, a tall man in a black suit, standing straight as a steel pillar security. No one waited for an invitation. They entered as if the apartment already belonged to them. The atmosphere shifted from heavy mourning to urgent, disciplined. The stylist stepped forward, opening the large bag. Her voice rang like a command, not a question. "We don't hide the pregnancy. We honor it." Madison paused briefly. The words sliced through the self-doubt binding her. No hiding, no denying. Pregnancy wasn't a burden, it was a crown. The dress was pulled from the dust bag. Emerald green burst under the light, silk fabric shimmering like pouring water. The dress she had bought in a moment of weakness, dreaming of a special day. A day she never thought would come. And now, ironically, the very night she was sidelined was the moment it found its purpose. Madison slipped it on. The cool silk hugged her body, falling naturally over her pregnant belly, not concealing but celebrating its presence. In the mirror, the image was no longer a woman left behind, but a pregnant queen, regal and unyielding. The makeup artist got to work. Quick, decisive movements. Bronze swept on her eyelids, making Madison's eyes blaze like fire hidden under ashes. Cheekbones sculpted sharp, proud. Lips painted deep red, no longer trembling, but full of the weight of a declaration. Meanwhile, the security man quietly checked every corner of the apartment, his eyes scanning like radar. He nodded, signaling, "Secure. The board is set." Madison smiled faintly. A small laugh, but enough to make the apartment echo differently. Just hours ago, this place was a stage of betrayal, of tears. Now, it transformed into a command center, preparing for a grand debut. When the makeup was done, Madison stood before the mirror. She didn't recognize herself. The tired woman with swollen, tear-reddened eyes was gone. Before her was a warrior. The emerald silk flickered with light, the classic silver necklace at her throat, like a legacy of generations gathered, and her eyes now burning, no longer empty. For a moment, Madison placed her hand on her belly. A gentle kick responded. She bit her lip, feeling as if the baby was conspiring, passing silent strength to its mother. The stylist stepped back, nodding in satisfaction. Perfect. The makeup artist closed the powder case, her hands trembling slightly, as if she too felt the unexpected energy surging. The security man approached, voice low. "The car is ready." Madison turned for one last look at the apartment. The glass walls, Italian furnishings, vintage wine, chandelier, all still there but powerless. They were no longer shackles, just an empty shell. She breathed deeply, then stepped out. The door slammed shut behind her, burying any remaining tears. Stepping into the hallway, Madison felt she had left her past behind. From that moment, she was no longer the wife left in the shadows. She was a reborn woman. And ahead, the lights of Manhattan tonight awaited. Manhattan's night exploded like a symphony of metal and light. The streets around the Grand Plaza Hotel bustled with limousines in a tailback, doors opening to familiar elite faces. Reporters crowded the red carpet, flashes bursting like an electric storm, relentless like endless fireworks. Inside, the Grand Plaza's grand hall blazed with crystal chandeliers scattering light like thousands of stars. Everything was arranged to make anyone entering feel small. The clink of glasses, hoarse laughter, calculated greetings all blending into an elite symphony, lively and superficial. Ethan entered with Veronica. He held her hand tightly, as if displaying his latest trophy. The black tuxedo hugged his frame, his smile bright white, eyes confident to the point of arrogance. Veronica wore a tight red dress, her smile forced but her eyes flickering with worry. She knew this place offered no mercy. But Ethan didn't care. In his mind, every light shone only on him. Whispers rose, camera lenses followed his steps. Ethan held his head high, certain tonight's performance would solidify his status among the tycoons. But then, the opposite door opened. The space changed instantly. A strange hush spread through the ballroom, as if someone had unplugged the noisy orchestra. Flashes fired non-stop, blinding, intense, not toward Ethan, but toward the woman who just entered. Madison. She strode in the silk emerald dress, light pouring down every fold, spilling like a waterfall. Her 6-month pregnant belly was not hidden. Instead, it was cradled like a symbol of strength and pride. Each step brimmed with confidence, graceful yet impossible to ignore. Beside her was Alexander Knight. The man needed no introduction. Tall stature, silver-streaked hair, a calm face exuding the authority of one accustomed to conquering worlds. He didn't seek attention, but that very composure made him the center. Together, they advanced into the hall. In that moment, all lights, all cameras, all breaths turned toward them. No one remembered Ethan anymore. Madison held her head high, her gaze sweeping the vast room. Every detail, chandeliers, red carpet, crystal tables, now no longer Ethan's stage, but the backdrop for her rebirth. At the front table, Roger Daniels, the real estate mogul Ethan had once fawned over, sat motionless, eyes narrowed. He watched Madison, watched Alexander, and in that moment, one could see numbers, contracts, power calculations shifting in his mind. Veronica gripped Ethan's hand, nails digging into his skin. But Ethan froze, his rehearsed smile turning into a clumsy mask. Blood drained from his face, leaving a gray pallor. Madison didn't stop at the threshold. She strode to the center, drawing every eye. No words needed. Her presence was the answer to everything. The room, in an instant, became a giant chessboard. And each of Madison's steps was the opening move. The host stepped up to the polished wooden podium, microphone trembling slightly in hand, his voice echoing through the hall like an overture. The guests hushed just enough to listen, but still murmured in habit. The soft clink of spoons on crystal glasses, chairs shifting lightly on marble, all forming the backdrop for the annual charity auction, where prestige and generosity were measured in figures. The gavel struck, the first item presented. A rare oil painting, colors swirling like classical music. Light spotlighted it. The audience murmured softly, but then returned to their own conversations. It was just procedure. Madison sat beside Alexander, chandelier light reflecting on her emerald silk. She didn't need to do anything. Her presence alone drew every gaze. In moments, she felt the reversal clearly. From sidelined, she became the focal point without uttering a word. Across the aisle, Ethan fidgeted. Sweat beaded at his temples, despite the perfectly controlled room temperature. He knew he had to do something, reclaim the attention stolen. When the second item appeared, a rare antique vase, Ethan raised his paddle high, his voice booming. $1.5 million. The room turned as one, scattered applause, a few gasps. Ethan smiled, confident the lavish bid would pull him back to center. He glanced quickly at Madison, hoping to catch envy or regret in her eyes. But she didn't look at him. Alexander tilted his head slightly. His voice rang out, low but sharp as a knife cutting through the thick air. 5 million. A collective exhale, then tense silence enveloped the room. Not just because the number far exceeded expectations, but the way it was said, not boastful, but like a preordained declaration. Alexander paused a beat, then added, "The kickoff for the Hale Initiative. Madison Hale's vision for sustainable green spaces." Her name echoed through the hall, crisp and brilliant. It landed like a hammer on marble, shifting the entire venue's rhythm. For a moment, silence blanketed. Then, as if ignited, applause erupted, rolling like waves crashing on rocks. Cameras flashed relentlessly, lights flickering toward Madison. Ethan went still, his face hardened, the fake smile shattering. Each clap was a cut, each flash a blade. He wanted to stand, to retort, but his feet stuck to the floor. Veronica squeezed his hand, trying to stay composed, but her own trembled. She felt the reversal acutely, as if the whole room was slipping from the orbit Ethan tried to hold. At the front table, Roger Daniels narrowed his eyes, fingers tapping the wooden surface. In his mind, Power equations rewrote themselves. The man he once saw as a promising pawn now seemed broken. And right in the middle of that board, Madison, the woman everyone once dismissed, suddenly became the pivotal piece. Madison breathed deeply, feeling the glaring light on her skin. She didn't need to stand or speak. Her silence, resonating with Alexander's statement, etched her name into every mind in the room. The Hale Initiative. The name became both a new symbol and a death sentence for the career Ethan had painstakingly built. In that moment, Madison understood. Tonight, she wasn't just the betrayed wife appearing for revenge. She was reborn, stepping onto a power board far larger than anything Ethan had ever touched. And the real game had only just begun. Applause still thundered through the grand hall, waves bouncing off the high ceiling and echoing back like ocean surf. The crystal chandelier overhead blazed, refracting into thousands of shattered light shards in the air. But for Ethan, every light felt like a knife, illuminating the truth he didn't want to face. He sat rigid, his smile rehearsed over years, now a cracked mask. Temples tensed, blood seemingly drained from his face, leaving a pallid gray. In that moment, he was no longer the star striding amid flashes. He was just a man left behind, exposed to the world. Veronica beside him shifted her chair slightly, her small hand trying to grip his. But instead of comfort, her trembling fingers only made Ethan realize the truth. Even his sole ally was now afraid. She wasn't sure standing by him was safe anymore. At the front row, Roger Daniels crossed his arms, eyes darkening. He didn't take his gaze off Madison. In his head, numbers, contracts, profit visions swirled. Ethan had been a prized pawn, but now he saw only a bishop swept from the board. And Madison, once seen as a shadow, now shone like a queen just flipped upright. The room's atmosphere shifted rhythm. Guests who had murmured about dresses now fell silent, eyes locked on Madison. She sat still, shoulders straight, the light swallowing her emerald silk, making her whole form glow. Madison didn't need to smile or speak. Her silence was the sharpest weapon. A young reporter in the corner jotted quickly, "The woman of the evening doesn't wear diamonds, she wears vision." Simple words, but they would become the headline for countless articles tomorrow morning. Ethan inhaled deeply, trying to muster some poise. He lifted his glass, but his hand shook so much the red liquid sloshed, nearly spilling. A few nearby saw, exchanged glances, then chuckled softly. Restrained laughs, but to Ethan, silent slashes. Veronica leaned in to whisper something, but Ethan didn't hear. His ears rang with the echoing applause, as if the whole room celebrated his downfall. Each glass clink, each cheer, etched another crack into his already broken mask. Madison glanced lightly toward him. Not for revenge, not to mock. That gaze was calmly cruel, like confirmation that he was no longer the center of this world. She didn't need to say anything. Her presence, the light swirling around her, was the heaviest verdict for him. As the MC continued introducing the next item, the room buzzed again. But the rhythm had changed. Ethan was no longer the focus, and Madison, she didn't need to seize the spotlight. It came to her. In a fleeting moment, Alexander tilted his head, whispering to her so only she could hear. "Tonight is just the beginning. Tomorrow will be the real battlefield." Madison nodded slightly, her eyes igniting with a light that surprised even her, determination. From a discarded woman, she had become the conductor. And Ethan, despite all the glamour he tried to build, was now just a lost shadow in the very party he thought he owned. The overhead chandelier still shone, sparkling like a brilliant galaxy. But under that light, Ethan's mask had cracked irreparably. And everyone knew, when a mask falls in the world of power, its wearer is never forgiven. The next morning, New York awoke to the prolonged honks on Fifth Avenue, the steam of coffee from sidewalk carts, and the surging wave of press like crashing tides. On newsstands everywhere, the image dominated the front page. Ethan arm in arm with Veronica. Forced smile. The necklace once promised to Madison gleaming on her neck. The headline short but enough to turn the city into an execution ground. Ethan Cole, from Manhattan star to one-night betrayer. Social media exploded. Gala photos cropped and spread like wildfire on wind. One account posted Ethan with Veronica captioned, "Want to ruin a career in one night? Contact Ethan Cole." It was shared tens of thousands of times, turning him into a joke. Satirical memes proliferated. One photoshopped Ethan in his tuxedo, but with a cracked mask face. Another grafted him holding the auction paddle, but 1.5 million changed to 1.5 minutes of honor. Virtual laughs, but sharp as knives, besieging the name he had labored to build. Ethan sat in the penthouse, newspaper spread on the table. Dark circles under his eyes, disheveled hair, shirt half-buttoned. The bold print stabbed his eyes. Hail initiative shocks. Madison, hail, from victim to architect of hope. And below, his name repeated, but no longer tied to glory, only mockery. He grabbed the phone, calling those who once toasted him at lavish parties. One by one, rings echoed, but no answers. Some went to voicemail, others rang endlessly. Ethan tried more, but only silence. In elite circles, silence meant death row. Veronica sat a few steps away, scrolling social media with trembling hands. She tried composure, but the screen's glow hid her pale face. Each comment, each jab, pulled her into the whirlpool with Ethan. In her brief glance at him, worry mixed with regret. Across the city, Madison opened her laptop. News flooded the screen, but this time, not to expose her pain, to celebrate her rebirth. Madison Hale, new icon of a green New York. Hale initiative launched with $5 million. Headlines like invisible crowns, placing her at the center Ethan once claimed as his own. She didn't smile or cry, just sat still, hand on her belly. A light kick from the baby curved her lips slightly. No words needed, but she knew. The change wasn't just for her, but for generations to come. Meanwhile, Ethan heard the doorbell. He answered, hoping for an ally to rescue. But it was the lawyer for Roger Daniels. The cold paper placed on the table. Notice canceling a $100 million real estate project. Reason stated bluntly, lack of credibility. Ethan stood frozen, fingers clenching white. In one night, everything he built over years, fame, contracts, reputation, collapsed like a sandcastle hit by tide. Outside the glass doors, New York bustled, lights blazing, pushing forward as if unaware a man was free-falling into darkness. Ethan slumped into the chair, hands over his head, eyes squeezed shut. In his ears, laughter, applause, camera flashes echoed like a mocking symphony. And for the first time, he understood. He was no longer the star, just a name whispered in the public's bitter laughs. And Madison, the woman he once saw as a shadow, was stepping into her own dawn. In the days following the gala, media buzzed like rising waves. Madison's name blanketed the press, while Ethan sank to the bottom of snide comments. But instead of diving into revenge's vortex, Madison chose another path. Silence and decisiveness. One morning, sunlight poured into the new Soho rental apartment, the living room filled with drawings and papers. Madison sat at the simple wooden table, divorce papers before her. No diamonds, no penthouse, no long list of demands. Just a few concise clauses. She reclaimed her maiden name, full custody of the child, and a trust fund to secure the baby's future. Her lawyer eyed the file, pausing. He was used to tear-soaked, asset-battling divorces, but Madison's was concise as a memo, devoid of retaliation. He asked, "Are you sure? The penthouse, shares, other things. You have rights to claim them all." Madison just shook her head, her eyes bright but calm. "I don't need them. I just want custody and a clean future." Her hands on her belly, feeling the gentle kick from the little life. In that instant, Madison knew. Glass walls, luxuries, all were chains. The true value she wanted to keep couldn't be bought with money. In the old penthouse, Ethan received the papers on a gloomy afternoon. Reading the final lines, his hands shook. No fighting, no asset demands, just a clean end. Madison's composure stabbed deeper than any accusation. He tossed the file on the table, paced the room, laughing bitterly. In his head, echoes of other divorces he'd heard. Lawsuits, press, scandals. But Madison chose differently, the path of grace. And that grace made him feel smaller, dirtier. Outside, press lurked, waiting for a prolonged battle to exploit. But when Madison announced the divorce in a brief press conference, she didn't mention Ethan. No criticism, no tears. Just one sentence. "I choose a new beginning with my old name, and with the child I believe is the best future of my life." The word spread across social media, becoming a manifesto for thousands of women left behind. It didn't resound with million-dollar figures, but cut sharper than any lawsuit. Ethan watched the TV screen, seeing Madison under lights, pregnant belly clear, emerald dress hugging her form. She shed no tears, sought no smear. She just affirmed her own worth. And in that moment, Ethan knew he lost not to scandal, but to that proud decisiveness. In Soho, Madison stepped onto the new apartment's balcony. The city stretched before her, rooftops mixed with trees, distant glass towers piercing the sky. She breathed deeply, free air filling her lungs. For the first time in months, she truly breathed. She placed her hand on her belly, whispering softly, "We start over from here." In the morning's silence, what she let go vanished like thin dust. What she kept name, child, dignity, stood firm like a milestone. For Madison, divorce wasn't an end. It was a dash, opening a new story. A story where she was no longer a shadow, but the one writing her life's script. In the days after Madison signed the divorce papers, New York awoke to a new rhythm. In the press, Hale Initiative appeared thickly, no longer confined to architecture or charity sections, but spilling into politics, culture, even entertainment. Some called it Brooklyn's Green Revolution. The initial $5 million was just a spark. But that spark caught at the right time. The city craved revival projects as old streets were increasingly forgotten, and within a week, funding waves poured in. A prestigious university foundation sent a collaboration letter. A real estate conglomerate, seeking image repair, pledged another $10 million. Smaller nonprofits joined one by one, like puzzle pieces completing the picture. Madison entered the new Soho office, a loft flooded with light, exposed red brick walls, high ceiling with visible beams, light wood floors. On the table, designs scattered, soft curves of parks, tree-shaded paths, community gardens nestled among high-rises. The air filled with laughter, rustling papers, hot coffee scent. The small team she assembled, old urban rise friends, young passionate architects, worked tirelessly. Madison no longer sat behind anyone. She led the table, outlining plans, tweaking details. Each line on the drawings pulsed like her new heartbeat. Meetings were tense but fiery, every idea weighed by her like the first brick of a future city. Media began calling Madison by new titles: Rebirth Icon, Architect of Hope. A major magazine even asked, "Are we witnessing the birth of a new New York, led by a woman once betrayed?" Madison didn't seek lights, but they found her. Each time she spoke, not with former tremor, but calm, decisive, and every word quoted like a mantra. When asked the secret, she just smiled and replied, "When pushed into darkness, sometimes the only thing you can do is light yourself up." The words spread like wildfire, shared millions of times on social media, turning Madison into a beacon for women reclaiming themselves. Meanwhile, Ethan faded from the public eye, news of him scattered in rumor sections. Penthouse hastily listed, debts frozen by court order. Friends who once surrounded him now vanished. People mentioned him not with respect, but bitter chuckles. Alexander Knight was different. He didn't appear as a savior. He visited the Soho office sometimes just to drop a box of croissants from his favorite Brooklyn bakery, remind Madison to rest, then vanish. He provided capital, opened doors, but never stole the light. The light was Madison's. One late afternoon, as sunlight slanted through the glass windows, Madison stood gazing at the first design pinned to the wall. It was an image of Brooklyn's abandoned rail line transformed into a hanging park overflowing with green. In her vision, rusted walls would be covered in vines, old tracks turned into shaded paths. What was once desolation would become space for children to run, communities to gather, memories revived. She placed her hand on her belly, feeling the gentle kick from the baby. In that moment, Madison understood. The Hale Initiative wasn't just a project. It was the legacy she wanted to leave for her child, for generations after. A fairer, greener, brighter New York. Outside, the city bustled, headlights sweeping streets like vibrant veins. But this time, Madison no longer felt swallowed by it. Instead, she was etching her name into every beat of the city. The Hale Initiative had transcended a gala. It had become a movement, and Madison, from the ashes of betrayal, had transformed into the architect of a new New York. Friday afternoon, sunset slid across Soho's glass windows, draping the office loft in soft gold. Madison stood by the table, leaning down to adjust stacked drawings, when the wooden door swung open. Alexander Knight entered, unobtrusive, unannounced. He was like a gentle breeze passing through, presence strong enough to shift the air's rhythm, but never dominating it. In his hand, a small paper box. "Croissants, from the old spot in Brooklyn," he said, voice steady and low, placing the box on the table. Madison looked up, chuckling softly. "You remembered again." Alexander didn't reply, just sat in the opposite chair, quietly observing the sprawling designs. His sharp eyes, familiar, now tinged with an indescribable gentleness. He didn't interfere, didn't edit, just watched, as if believing Madison was the true guide. "Universities are racing to join," Madison said, voice laced with surprise. "I never thought the project could spread this fast." Alexander raised an eyebrow. "Did you dare think, or were you never allowed to think?" The question halted Madison. For a moment, Ethan's image flashed. Times he dismissed ideas, times he told her, "You don't fit tonight." Madison clenched her fingers lightly. Alexander leaned back, gaze unwavering. "Don't forget, this city thirsts for leaders. It just needs someone brave enough." Madison fell silent. In her heart, that fire had blazed long ago, but Alexander reminded her it had never gone out. The moment between them was quiet, but not awkward. Street wind slipped through the door crack, carrying distant Manhattan sounds. Madison sat, nibbling a piece of pastry, buttery crispness. Simple, but in that instant, she felt heard, seen, without needing to prove. Alexander tilted his head slightly. "Are you prepared for the next round?" "The next round?" Madison asked. "The gala was just the opener. As the Hale Initiative expands, there will be those trying to turn it into a tool. Politicians for votes, businessmen for deals. Prepare, because the brighter the light, the deeper the shadows." Madison nodded slowly. She knew he was right. And in that calm gaze, she saw not just a powerful ally, but a mentor, a companion, sometimes even a mirror reflecting herself. But amid the warnings, a silent respect. Alexander never decided for her. He cleared paths, but let her choose direction. He gave power, but let her hold it. As dusk fell, staff had left, leaving just the two in the golden-lit loft. Madison sat across from Alexander, drawings between them like a promise of the future. "You never show up for glory," Madison said slowly, "but I know without you, I wouldn't have dared call." Alexander furrowed his brow, lips curving into a rare smile. "You're wrong, Madison. I'm not the reason. I'm just the reminder. You were the one who called." The answer silenced her. A simple truth, but profound. Everything unfolding, lights, applause, articles, movement, didn't stem from him. It stemmed from her decision, from the moment her finger pressed the numbers on the black business card. Night fell, Manhattan outside lighting up like a sea of stars. Madison stood by the window, gazing at the connected light veins, feeling the city no longer devouring her, but unfolding like a blank page. Alexander stood behind, not touching, not interrupting, just silent, like a calm shadow, letting her know she wasn't alone on the new path. Madison gently placed her hand on her belly. The baby stirred softly, as if responding, and she smiled not from comfort, but because for the first time, she truly believed. She was strong enough to lead, bright enough to light the way. In the once glittering penthouse, now only darkness and cold voids remained. Ethan sat in the living room, half-empty bottle on the table, newspaper spread wide before him. The bold headline like a slash. Madison Hale, architect of a new New York. Under her smiling photo, hand on her pregnant belly, the text emphasized, Ethan Cole, from Rising Star, now just a name tied to betrayal and failure. He crumpled the paper, but the rustle didn't drown the echoes in his head. Each word, each line, like knife cuts. The phone rang. He snatched it, hoping for an ally, but a cold voice. "We can't continue the partnership." Short words, then a long beep. Ethan redialed, but only voicemail. Veronica, once his boasted pride, had vanished 3 days ago. No goodbye, just a few dresses left in the closet. She knew the ship was sinking, no reason to drown with him. Ethan shuffled around the room, eyeing the glass walls that once reflected his glory. Now they mirrored a haggard man, tousled hair, wrinkled shirt. He slammed his fist against the glass, but the echo only made him feel smaller, more lost on Manhattan's 55th floor. A bank text lit the screen. Overdue loan. Immediate payment required. Another email. Assets frozen per court order. Ethan collapsed into the chair, head in hands. Memories flooded when applause hailed him, when he strode confidently with Madison. He once thought her just a shadow, existing to lift him higher. But now, that shadow had risen, while he plummeted into the abyss. The room silent to suffocation. Only wind whistling outside the glass frame, reminding the city lived on, pushing forward, not slowing for his pain. In desperation, Ethan turned on the TV. Madison appeared, standing before a Brooklyn hanging park design, eyes blazing with belief. Beside her, major sponsors, press crowding. The host called her the new face of rebirth. Ethan gripped the remote, intending to turn off, but couldn't. Eyes glued to Madison's image, as if bound. He saw no wounds left for him to exploit, no softness to deny, only strength he never reached. A bitter laugh burst out, echoing in the empty room. Ethan whispered, voice hoarse, I destroyed myself, with my own hands. Across the city, no one mentioned his name at elite parties. Roger Daniels cut all ties, partners erased him from contracts. Those who once toasted him now silent, as if never known. Manhattan once hailed him as a new icon. Now it turned its back as swiftly as it welcomed. Ethan alone, amid the empty apartment surrounded by glass and marble. What was once his throne, now just a prison. A gilded prison, with no one beside, no one remembering. He gazed at the city outside, headlights crisscrossing like pumping veins. And he understood, no matter how he screamed, the city wouldn't stop for a fallen man. Ethan Cole, from Pride's Peak, now just the abandoned one. One clear morning, sunlight pierced the large Soho office windows, stretching across the wood floor. Madison stood before the pinned board full of drawings, each line now not sketches, but plans come to life. Outside, Brooklyn transformed. The abandoned rail line gradually greened, rusted steel frames into winding paths, children running amid flower beds, residents smiling on benches under trees. The Hail Initiative was no longer a phrase. It had become the city's new heartbeat. Architecture magazines called it the Green Symphony. Politicians, journalists, ordinary people all mentioned Madison. But this time, not pity, but admiration. Madison stepped onto the balcony, wind tousling her hair, eyes toward the horizon where Manhattan rose with shimmering glass towers. She placed her hand on her belly, now heavier, but no longer a weakness symbol. It was life's emblem, a future growing with her. Alexander Knight appeared behind, silent as always. In hand, a coffee cup. He didn't intrude on the glow, nor led. He just stood beside, like a sturdy milestone in shadows. The city is calling your name, he said, voice low. Madison turned, eyes bright but calm. No, the city is calling its own name. I'm just redrawing the dream that's always existed for them. The reply made Alexander nod slightly, a rare smile flickering at his lips. He understood Madison had crossed the boundary, from victim to creator, from shadow to icon. Inside, young architects discussed passionately, drawings strewn across the table, laughter, debates blending like harmonious music. Madison entered. They looked up with trusting eyes. She no longer had to prove worth. She was the leader, the movement's heart. A young reporter asked in a live interview, "What made you not fall, but rise stronger?" Madison smiled, eyes gentle but firm. When pushed into darkness, sometimes the only thing you can do is light yourself up. The answer spread like fire, becoming a healing message for thousands. Across the city, Ethan vanished from headlines. Scant mentions in rumor columns, apartments for sale, debts hanging. The once proud man on red carpets now remembered with pity. Manhattan sidelined him swiftly, as it elevated. Madison looked back no more. She knew the past closed. What mattered was the path ahead, a greener city, a new generation breathing in spaces she painstakingly revived. That afternoon, as Soho sunlight faded, Madison sat alone with an old notebook. Not designs, not contracts, just simple lines. Tomorrow, I'll be a little better than today. She smiled, closed it, hearing the baby's gentle kick. In the heartbeat mingling with the city's pulse, Madison knew this wasn't the end, just the opening chapter. Someday, new challenges would come even bigger, fiercer. But this time, she wasn't afraid. For Madison Hale was no longer just a once betrayed woman. She was the architect of hope, and her story had only just begun. The city never sleeps. New York still blazed, still bustled, still devoured the weak, and lifted the daring. Amid that sky full of lights, Madison stood on the Soho balcony, hand on her belly, smiling as the baby stirred again. She lost a marriage, witnessed betrayal, fell to solitude's depths, but from that darkness, she emerged, lighting herself, and that light spread, becoming the city's new beat. Ethan dissolved like a name swept by wind, but Madison, from ashes, became an icon. And the best part? This was just the start. Who knows what lay ahead? Other power players challenging. Alexander Knight, the enigmatic ally, staying distant forever, or one day their bond shifting. Stay tuned, and if you want to continue with Madison in the next chapter, leave a comment. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is now. Like, subscribe to the channel, and share this video because our story doesn't stop here. Oh my God, he got 2 women pregnant at the same time, and they're due just days apart. Can you imagine a betrayal more heartless than that? I'm Arya, and at 28, I thought I was living a dream. A suburban home, a successful lawyer husband, and our first child on the way. But in my 7th month, I caught him in the hospital holding hands with Amanda, his personal assistant, gazing at an ultrasound screen like a perfect little family. That was the moment my illusions shattered. I cried, I trembled, but then I decided I wouldn't be a victim anymore. I chose a revenge that left his law firm stunned and the local press buzzing. Want to know what I did on their stage? Spring sunlight poured through the wide windows of the suburban house, bathing the soft beige walls in a golden glow. Arya stood in the kitchen, her hand unconsciously stroking her rounded belly, her heart full of joy. To her, this house wasn't just a place to live. It was the symbol of a dream come true. On the wooden shelf by the fireplace, a silver-framed wedding photo glinted in the light. A young bride in a white dress, eyes sparkling with trust, and a tall man in a tuxedo holding her waist tightly. For 5 years, that photo sat neatly on the shelf, a reminder that they began this journey with love and promises. Brandon, 32, a lawyer on the rise, was the kind of man anyone would admire. His charming way of speaking, confident stride, and magnetic charisma made everyone around him feel special. To Arya, he was everything: a devoted husband, an ambitious partner, the ideal future father. The day he gave her flowers for no reason or surprised her with a picnic just to watch the sunset, Arya believed their love was unique. He painted their future with certain words, as if every detail was preordained. A suburban home, a solid career, a happy family. Now, with their first child on the way, Arya thought the picture was complete. The nursery upstairs was painted mint green, bright and fresh. On the table, diapers, bottles, and tiny folded clothes were neatly arranged. Arya often paused at the half-open door, gazing at the room, imagining herself holding her baby. She believed Brandon was just as excited. He would place his hand on her belly, whisper sweet words, and smile as if he could already see his journey as a father. For Arya, happiness was there, clear, simple, unquestionable. But the first cracks are never loud. They appear quietly, like a thread unraveling from a tapestry thought to be unbreakable. Brandon started coming home late more often. At first, it was just meetings running long, then unavoidable cases. Arya grew used to him walking in past midnight, tossing his suit jacket on the chair, offering a tired smile. "This case is huge, sweetheart. I had to stay late to prepare." She believed him. Or rather, she wanted to. Brandon's image in her eyes was too perfect to allow any stains. Still, loneliness crept in. Each prenatal visit, Arya entered the ultrasound room alone. Around her, other couples held hands, their eyes sparkling as they saw their baby on the screen. Arya forced a smile, snapping photos of the monitor, thinking of how she'd share them with Brandon. He'd apologize, kiss her forehead, sigh about missing it. She told herself his work was too important, that he'd make it up one day. but deep down, a silent void grew. Lisa, Arya's college friend, let slip one day. I swear I saw Brandon at the 5th Street Cafe yesterday afternoon. Weird, didn't he say he was in court? Arya brushed it off with a laugh. She didn't want to believe it. Couldn't. Brandon was the man she trusted completely, the father of her unborn child. She tucked her doubts away, buried them deep, as if ignoring them meant they didn't exist. Yet, small changes persisted. Brandon used to leave his phone around the house, unbothered. Now, the screen was always face down, or tucked tightly in his pocket. When it buzzed, he stepped outside, muttering, "Work." Arya noticed he changed clothes the moment he got home, rushing to the shower as if washing away more than work stress. Each detail was a scratch on the perfect picture. Like the scratch on his BMW's door, they lingered, waiting for the right light to reveal them. Arya wasn't naive. Deep down, a voice whispered something was wrong, but she clung to her old faith. She held on to the rare evenings when Brandon brought flowers, his radiant smile when he spoke of being a dad. That faith was like a framed photo on the wall, still straight on the surface. But the nail holding it was loosening, and Arya, in blind hope, kept adjusting the frame, never looking behind it. Outside, the March breeze rustled the maple trees in front of the house, their branches swaying like a warning. Arya placed a hand on her belly, whispering to her baby, "Everything will be okay." But in her eyes, a nameless unease flickered. A silent storm was brewing, and it was only a matter of time before it swept everything away. As her pregnancy entered the 2nd trimester, Arya felt her body grow heavier, but her heart lightened at the thought of the child growing inside her. She kept her morning walks through the tree-lined neighborhood, smiling at families playing with their kids in the yards. From the outside, Arya looked like a woman who had it all: a beautiful home, a successful lawyer husband, and a little angel soon to arrive. But deep within, a void stirred, like a cold draft seeping through a door thought to be sealed. Brandon came home later and later. Often, the clock ticked past midnight when he arrived, tie loosened, shirt wrinkled. He'd smile, kiss her, murmur, "Sorry, this case is intense." Arya nodded, asking no more. She used to be proud of his dedication, but now, his smile only soothed her unease for a moment, until he disappeared into the bathroom and loneliness flooded back. The sound of running water behind the closed door became the soundtrack of her sleepless nights. His phone was another clue. Before, Brandon left it on the kitchen counter, buzzing without care. Arya never minded. Now, the screen was always down, sometimes tucked tightly in his suit pocket. When a message or call came, he stepped outside, voice low, "Just work, love." Arya tried to convince herself she was paranoid. But his hurried glances, the way he closed the door to take calls, it left question marks hanging in her mind. Prenatal visits deepened her loneliness. The OBGYN waiting room was filled with couples, husbands holding wives' hands, eyes fixed on ultrasound screens. Arya sat alone, hand on her belly, forcing a smile when the nurse called her name. She snapped photos of the ultrasound, sent them to Brandon. His replies came hours later. Curt, "Looks great. Sorry I couldn't be there." Slowly, the apologies became a hollow recording, emotionless. She began to feel she was raising this child alone, even with Brandon sleeping under the same roof. Lisa, her college friend, planted the first seed of doubt. One afternoon, over coffee near the hospital, Lisa blurted, "I swear I saw Brandon on 5th Street yesterday, right when he said he was in court. Sure he didn't mix up his schedule?" Arya laughed awkwardly, defending him. "He's juggling a lot of cases." But Lisa's words echoed like a dripping faucet in a dark room. Brandon could be busy, but how busy? Arya started noticing more. The way he changed clothes the moment he got home, shirts nearly falling to the floor in his haste. The way he scrubbed off his cologne, claiming it was office stress. The way he avoided her gaze when she asked about his next day's schedule. These small details wove a thin veil over the truth. Arya didn't dare pierce it, afraid that lifting it would collapse her perfect picture. Late at night, when Brandon slept, Arya lay awake, eyes open, listening to the clock's relentless ticking. The baby stirred, as if reminding her life went on, no matter what. Arya placed a hand on her belly, whispering, "Mommy's here." In the dark, It sounded more like a prayer than a promise. The tension grew palpable. One evening, Brandon came home with a faint whiff of unfamiliar perfume. Not his usual cologne, but a feminine scent. Arya hesitated, wanting to ask, but bit her lip. Instead, she turned to the sink, washing dishes, letting her doubts pile up in her chest. When Brandon hugged her from behind, hands on her belly, Arya forced a smile. But it trembled, no longer natural. As months passed, her belly grew, and so did the distance between them. Each time she passed the finished nursery, Arya realized she was the only one standing there, imagining the future. Brandon often said, "I'm busy, but when the baby comes, everything will change." The promise repeated until it became meaningless. One April afternoon, driving to the hospital for a routine checkup, Arya felt an unusual unease. The baby moved more, as if sensing something. The parking lot was packed, and she slowly circled for a spot. Then, in the third row, she saw it the familiar black BMW, with the long scratch on the driver's door. Her heart stopped. Brandon had said he had a long trial today, so why was his car here? She sat frozen in her car, hands gripping the wheel. Her first emotion wasn't doubt, but hope. Maybe he'd finished early, wanting to surprise her. Maybe today he'd hold her hand in the ultrasound room, see their child again. Warmth surged in her chest, drowning the moment of suspicion. Arya took a deep breath, opened the car door, and hurried toward the hospital entrance. But deep in her heart, a premonition stirred, like an invisible hand slowing her steps. Sometimes, the truth waiting behind a door isn't the hope you cling to. The hospital was bustling that afternoon. Shoes clacked on tiled floors, the intercom called patients' names, echoing in the sterile air. Arya walked in, hand on her belly, heart pounding harder than usual. She tried smiling at the receptionist, like any expectant mother at a routine visit. But inside, unease smoldered, a wave ready to break. Her steps slowed as she passed the OB/GYN waiting area. She scanned the room, hoping to spot Brandon sitting somewhere, holding case files, ready to surprise his wife. But the benches held only other couples, whispering, their eyes bright with anticipation. Arya frowned, approaching the front desk. "Excuse me, is there a Brandon Walker scheduled with me today?" Her voice was soft, but her palms were sweaty. The nurse glanced at the computer, then looked up, slightly confused. "No, ma'am, it's just your name today." A cold blade seemed to slice down Arya's spine. If Brandon wasn't scheduled, why was his car in the lot? She walked slowly down the hallway, each step heavier. The white walls glared coldly, the antiseptic smell sharp, the clatter of a cart's wheels echoing. Then, from the end of the hall, a familiar sound, a low, confident laugh, the voice that once made her heart flutter. "Brandon." Arya froze. Her body stiffened, blood rushing to her face. Her heart pounded so loudly she thought it echoed in the hall. She moved toward the door where the laugh came from. A small glass window beckoned her to look inside, like a cold eye. She gripped the handrail, eyes fixed on the glass. The sight before her shattered her world. Brandon sat close to a woman on the exam table, holding her hand, his gaze tender, smiling at the ultrasound screen. Arya's heart sank, her stomach twisted, her breath caught in her chest. The woman wasn't a stranger. Amanda, Brandon's personal assistant, who'd smiled politely at Arya during company events. Amanda was pregnant, her belly prominent, clearly in her final month. Arya trembled, straining to see the screen, where the doctor pointed at a blurry white image of a fetus. Then the doctor's voice rang clear. "The pregnancy is progressing well, due in 3 days." 3 days. Just 3 days after Arya's due date. Her body felt like it was falling into a bottomless abyss. Memories pieced together. Late nights, face-down phones, rehearsed apologies. They formed a single truth: Brandon hadn't just betrayed her. He was building another family, parallel to hers. Arya stood there, hands shaking, her belly tightening with a sudden contraction. The baby stirred violently, as if reacting to her mother's chaos. Cold sweat ran down her temple, her eyes locked on the scene. Brandon leaned in, whispering something to Amanda, making her laugh softly. That gesture, that look, it was exactly how he'd been with Arya in her early pregnancy months. The metal door pushed her forward. She couldn't stand outside another second. With all her remaining strength, She opened it. The hinges creak cut through the small room's chatter. Brandon turned, his eyes wide, stunned, like a deer in headlights. Amanda froze, lips parted, speechless. In that moment, the room fell into a deadly silence. No one moved, no sound except the steady beep of the ultrasound machine. Brandon stood, stammering. "Arya, what are you doing here?" His voice trembled, not with affection, but raw panic. Arya stood tall, her gaze colder than ever. She didn't need to scream or cry. Her voice was chillingly calm. "I have an appointment. You said you were in court today. So this is your courtroom?" The air thickened. Amanda turned to Brandon, eyes wide with confusion. "Brandon, who is she?" He stood silent, mouth open, no words escaping. Arya cut in, unflinching. "I'm his wife, 7 months pregnant with his child. Like you." Color drained from Amanda's face. She pulled her hand from Brandon's, her eyes wide, realizing she wasn't just betrayed, but made the other woman in a cruel charade. The doctor shifted awkwardly, clearly wishing to vanish. Brandon began stammering excuses, but they were meaningless. Everything was laid bare. Arya took a deep breath, turned, and walked out, her steps heavy. The long hallway gleamed under fluorescent lights, her footsteps echoing coldly. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. Her world had crumbled behind that glass window. In the parking lot, Arya nearly collapsed. Her breath came in gasps, tears streaming uncontrollably. She slumped over the steering wheel, sobs choking her chest. The baby stirred again, a strong kick pulling her back to reality. In that moment, a spark of resolve flickered through the ashes of despair. She wouldn't let this betrayal drown her. She would fight. That night, the once warm suburban house became a cold prison. Arya sat motionless on the sofa, the yellow lamplight casting shadows on her pale face. Brandon didn't come home, and she no longer expected him to walk through the door. Her phone buzzed incessantly. Texts, calls, rehearsed excuses. Arya ignored them. To her, his words were now hollow echoes. Lisa arrived after a desperate call. She hugged Arya, letting her friend's tears soak her shoulder. "You're not alone," Lisa whispered. "We'll find the truth." Those words were a small anchor keeping Arya from drowning in despair. That night, between choked sobs, Arya made the most crucial decision. She wouldn't be a victim. If Brandon chose betrayal, she'd choose justice. The days that followed were a blur, but within that blur, Arya acted. She started with the simplest place: email. Brandon's computer was still linked to their home network. With trembling hands, Arya opened it. In a few clicks, Pandora's box sprang open. Emails about payments, messages to Amanda saved on the server, receipts for lavish dinners, appointments to view houses in another suburb. Each piece of evidence was a shard of broken glass, cutting into her eyes. Each night, while Brandon was away, Arya sat before the glowing screen, saving every file, every bank statement. She stored them in a secret folder, simply named Hope, the name she'd chosen for her unborn child. Hope was her strength, her reason to keep going. The more she uncovered, the more stunned she became. Brandon had maintained 2 lives for months, funding both families, opening secret accounts, even putting a deposit on an apartment he planned to share with Amanda. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was a calculated financial scheme, a sophisticated deception. Arya knew she needed more than anger. She needed strategy. She needed the law on her side. Lisa introduced her to Carol, a seasoned divorce lawyer known for never losing major cases. In Carol's book-filled office, Arya recounted everything, presenting each piece of evidence. Carol listened intently, occasionally nodding, her eyes lighting up at the documents. Then she leaned back, smiling faintly. "Sweetheart, your husband just handed us the keys to his kingdom. Legally, we can prove financial fraud, ethical violations. He'll pay." For the first time in days, Arya felt a glimmer of light in the darkness. This wasn't just about emotional revenge. It was justice. She'd protect her child, her future, from those deceitful hands. And deep down, a thought emerged. Nothing would hurt Brandon more than being rejected by the world he worshipped. The law firm where Brandon worked prided itself on family values and integrity. Every year, they hosted a grand gala, attended by partners, clients, and media. Brandon had bragged to Arya about its importance, how partners loved family men. She remembered every word, and now, she'd turn it into a weapon. Over the next weeks, Arya prepared silently. She compiled evidence into a slideshow, carefully arranging photos, bank statements, emails. Each detail was a sharpened blade. Meanwhile, she accepted an invitation to speak at the gala, introduced as the devoted wife of a rising lawyer. The irony almost made her laugh. They'd never see it coming. By day, Arya attended prenatal visits, prepared for delivery, and stayed calm in front of neighbors and friends. By night, in the silent house, she sat at the computer, rehearsing every word, every pause, ensuring she wouldn't falter on stage. She'd be strong, composed, letting the truth shine. In moments of exhaustion, Arya slumped at the table, hands on her belly. Hope stirred, reminding her why she was doing this to protect a new life. She chose the name Hope not just for hope, but because her daughter proved she was stronger than any betrayal. Despite the pain, Arya realized she'd changed. From a betrayed wife, she became a woman playing a chess game, each move calculated. And Brandon, who thought he controlled everything, would soon learn he was just a pawn. The night before the gala, Arya looked in the mirror. The emerald dress hugged her 8.5-month pregnant figure. The reflection wasn't a broken wife, but a warrior ready to step into the light. She whispered to herself, "Tomorrow, the truth won't be hidden anymore." The downtown hotel sparkled with crystal chandeliers. High heels clicked on marble floors, laughter mixed with the clink of glasses, creating a symphony of celebration. This was the night Walker and Associates prided itself on, where partners, judges, politicians, and local media gathered to honor family values and professional integrity. Arya entered the grand hall, her 8.5-month belly accentuated by the striking emerald dress. All eyes turned to her. Brandon, arm in arm with her, smiled confidently, as if he were the luckiest man alive. Colleagues patted his shoulder, praising the perfect husband and future father. Arya smiled politely, but inside, a storm brewed. Not far away, Amanda appeared, in a simpler dress, her face tired but maintaining a professional smile. She followed a group of staff, unaware that tonight would end both her career and the false romance she'd been drawn into. When Arya's eyes briefly met Amanda's, a flicker of sadness passed. They were both victims of the same lie. Guests took their seats. The music softened. The MC introduced the special speaker. "Please welcome Arya Walker, the devoted and proud wife of lawyer Brandon Walker, to share a few words about family." Applause filled the room. Brandon squeezed her hand, his eyes gleaming with pride. He had no idea this moment would bury his career. Arya stood, walking to the stage, her low heels clicking steadily. The spotlight bathed her face in radiance. She began with gratitude, her voice soft but clear. "I'm deeply honored to be welcomed into this family. I'm proud to be the wife of a man dedicated to his career, soon to be a respected father." The audience nodded, smiled, some winking at Brandon in approval. She continued, speaking of trust, honesty, and the value of marriage. Each word was a needle, stitching the room into attentive silence. Brandon sat in the front row, his face beaming with smugness, unaware his smile would soon freeze. Arya paused, took a deep breath, and shifted her tone. "But, recently, I learned that not everyone we trust lives by these values." She pressed the remote. The large screen behind her lit up. The first image appeared. Brandon and Amanda at an intimate restaurant dinner. Murmurs rippled through the room. Brandon stood, but before he could speak, the second image flashed, them holding hands while viewing a house. Then a series of messages appeared, with promises of starting a new life when the baby arrives. The air froze. You could hear gasps from those nearby. Brandon staggered, his face drained of color. Amanda covered her mouth, eyes wide with horror. The murmurs turned to exclamations. "Oh my God! No way!" Arya stood firm, her voice clear. "While I was pregnant with our first child, my husband got his assistant pregnant. Our due dates are 3 days apart. He lived 2 lives, 2 families, funding both from the same wallet, deceiving both me and her." A pin could have dropped in the silence. Brandon tried to approach the stage, stammering, I can explain. But hotel security stepped forward, blocking the way, their eyes cold, awaiting orders. Arya clicked to the next slide. Bank statements showing duplicate expenses, emails about apartment deposits. She read each line, each number, like a prosecutor delivering a verdict. Brandon sank into his chair, hands clutching his head. Amanda sobbed, fleeing the room, her heels echoing hollowly. The managing partner stood, face red with fury. Brandon Walker, as of this moment, you are suspended indefinitely. The firm will conduct a full investigation. Scattered applause broke out. Not in celebration, but in shock and agreement. Arya took a deep breath, closing with her final words. This morning, I filed for divorce. I will protect my daughter from this betrayal. And I will let justice judge the man who betrayed both his family and his clients. Her voice rang out, filling every corner, leaving the audience frozen. The spotlight lit the room, but Arya knew the true light had shifted from Brandon to her. Tonight, the stage built to honor him became his career's grave. She left the stage, stepped steady, hand on her belly. Hope kicked softly, as if nodding in approval. Arya knew this was just the start of a long battle, but she'd won the first round. The news spread like wildfire. The next morning, the local legal paper ran a bold headline. Lawyer Walker exposed for affair at firm gala. Professional forums buzzed with comments, some mocking, some outraged. Major clients called the firm, demanding answers. Within 24 hours, Brandon went from rising star to a symbol of ruin. The State Bar Association launched an urgent investigation. Colleagues who once clapped his back now avoided him, some blocking his number. His phone rang constantly, not with offers, but demands for explanations, warning letters. His image, once gracing prestigious magazines, was now tied to scandal. Arya stayed silent. She didn't need to speak. The truth carried enough weight. Her focus was singular. Her daughter, soon to be born. Prenatal visits now included Lisa. Each time Hope's heartbeat echoed through the ultrasound speaker, Arya felt lighter. Amid the outside chaos, a pure, steady life pulsed within her. Brandon, meanwhile, panicked. He tried reaching Arya, sending flowers, texts, begging for a chance, but Arya didn't open the door. She'd given building security and local police a temporary protective order, just in case. To her, his presence was now a threat, no longer a shoulder to lean on. In Carol's office, the stack of documents grew. The divorce petition was filed, demanding full custody, the house, and compensation for emotional harm. Brandon's weak protests through his lawyer were crushed by Arya's evidence. Carol smiled, closing the file. You're not just divorcing, you're reclaiming justice. The ruling was pending, but Brandon had already lost everything. Fired from the firm, his reputation ruined, accounts frozen pending review. The status that once lifted him now trapped him. Then came the moment Arya awaited most. One June night, a warm breeze drifted through her bedroom window. She woke to sharp pains in her belly. The first contractions hit, strong and relentless. Lisa rushed her to the hospital. Neon lights glared down the long hallway as nurses wheeled Arya to the delivery room. Sweat-soaked, breathing heavily, her eyes burned with determination. Each pain wasn't a burden, but a step toward a miracle. She gripped Lisa's hand, whispering, "I can do this." Hours later, a cry tore through the thick air. A healthy baby girl, eyes closed, skin pink. The nurse placed the baby on Arya's chest. She looked at her, tears streaming. "Hope," she whispered. "You're my hope." In that moment, all the pain, betrayal, sleepless nights, vanished. Only love remained, absolute. Brandon was at the hospital that day, but barred from the room. Security stood at the door, checking papers per Arya's instructions. From the hallway, he heard his daughter's first cry, but couldn't touch her. A prize he once longed for was now beyond reach, lost by his own choices. 2 days later, Amanda gave birth to a son in another hospital. Brandon wasn't there. She quietly left the city, moving back with her parents, seeking a fresh start. From what Lisa heard, the law firm helped Amanda find a job elsewhere, a small gesture to offset her losses. In the weeks that followed, Arya recovered. The suburban house, now just mother and daughter, echoed with newborn cries. But instead of loneliness, Arya felt alive. Hope was her small light, illuminating every dark corner. Each time she watched her daughter sleep, Arya grew stronger. Brandon was bound by court orders, monthly child support, supervised visits, awaiting the final ruling. He tried to cling to the father role, but his time was limited to brief hours in a visitation room, under a social worker's watchful eye. His career, reputation, love, all gone. And Arya, though exhausted, knew the road ahead was open. She no longer carried the weight in silence. She'd exposed the truth, given birth to new life, and proven she wasn't defined by another's betrayal. That summer, the suburban house, once a battlefield of tears, filled with new sounds. A baby's wails, babbled nonsense, soft lullabies from a small speaker by the crib. Arya held her daughter, eyes sparkling in the morning sunlight streaming through the curtains. Hope, true to her name, gave Arya a reason to rise each day, despite sleepless nights and lingering heartaches. Brandon lingered, a shadow at the edge of her life. He visited Hope every 2 weeks, under supervision. The visits took place in a neutral family center room, pale gray walls, a plastic table, scattered toys. Arya sat across, watching silently, never interfering. Brandon tried to play the father in those fleeting hours, but his eyes betrayed defeat. The child stirred in the arms of a man she didn't truly know, then turned to her mother for safety. To Arya, these weren't reunions. They were reminders that the past no longer controlled her present. He was now a minor character in the story she authored. As Hope's sleep stabilized, Arya looked further. She didn't want to just survive, to be remembered as the betrayed wife. She wanted to rebuild on a foundation Brandon could never touch. From talks with Carol and Lisa, an idea formed, an event planning company, where every detail was perfect, ensuring no one endured the chaos and deceit she had. Arya started in her living room. The computer sat on the table. Brandon's old files now scratched paper for her business plan. She wrote goals, ideas, projected costs. At first, they were clumsy notes, but they wove into a solid plan. She named the company True North Events, a nod to the North Star, a symbol of unwavering direction and trust. The initial capital came from the divorce settlement. Arya saw it not as Brandon's gift, but as what she reclaimed from years of deception. With it, she rented a small office, bought desks, and invested in a professional website. Lisa, ever loyal, became her first partner, handling marketing. The early days were tough. Arya juggled motherhood, client emails, and supplier meetings. Some days, she carried Hope in a sling, rocking her to sleep in a cluttered office while revising contracts. But instead of exhaustion, she felt a new energy. Each client, each perfectly executed event, proved she hadn't fallen. Word of True North Events spread. Arya's focus on detail, listening to clients, and centering their stories made her company stand out. A wedding she planned appeared in a local magazine, praised for its warmth and authenticity. Those accolades were rewards no divorce settlement could match. 3 years later, Arya sat in a spacious new office downtown. Hope, now toddling, ran around with a bouquet of balloons, laughing brightly. The sight softened Arya's heart. She knew this was her true family, one that didn't need Brandon. Brandon, meanwhile, worked as a low-paid legal assistant, a dull job. His dream of becoming a firm partner was dust. Colleagues who once lifted him now turned away. He paid child support on time, not willingly, but because Carol ensured the law compelled him. Arya didn't care. Her only concern was Hope's love and safety. Watching Hope run around, Arya thought of the future. Hope would grow knowing her worth didn't depend on others' treatment. She'd learn strength came from refusing to be a victim. And when Hope asked about her father, Arya would tell a version of the truth, not bitter, but clear enough for her to understand that sometimes people choose the wrong path. The setting sun bathed the office in golden light. Arya smiled, thinking, I did it. From ruins, she'd built an unshakable foundation, reliant on no one but herself. Time was the fairest judge. 3 years later, Brandon's name no longer echoed in courthouse halls or graced magazine covers. He was a ghost in a low-tier law office, buried in petty files, copying documents, fetching coffee for colleagues. Once a lawyer tipped for partnership, now he was called assistant, even by less talented peers. The gossip about his fall never faded. Each time Brandon entered a courtroom, eyes followed, silent. They didn't speak openly, but he knew they remembered the gala, the slides exposing his affair. That night was etched in the legal community's memory, a stain he couldn't wash away. His personal life was no better. Amanda had left town after giving birth, raising her son with her parents. Brandon paid support for both children but never saw his son. Old friends distanced themselves. His family grew weary of defending him. In a rundown rented apartment, he lived alone, staring at peeling gray walls that mirrored his mistakes. Arya, in contrast, stood firm. True North events thrived. She appeared on a local TV show, discussing women's resilience and turning pain into strength. Contracts poured in, and her name became a symbol of inspiration. Her career, trust, and community stood with her. Yet, the law required occasional face-to-face encounters. One winter morning, they met in family court to review support and custody terms. Brandon sat across, haggard, hair prematurely gray. He avoided her gaze. When the judge asked about financial obligations, Brandon's voice was hoarse. "I've paid on time." Carol, still by Arya's side, calmly placed a file on the table, proving not just compliance, but tight legal oversight. The judge nodded, his glance at Brandon tinged with disdain. In that moment, Arya felt no triumph. Instead, a hollow emptiness. The man who'd once been her world was now a broken shadow, trembling before justice. She realized the greatest revenge wasn't in rulings or payments. It was in this. He destroyed himself. After the hearing, Brandon tried to speak. "Arya, maybe one day." She cut him off, voice calm as a blade. "That day will never come, Brandon. I've moved on. Our daughter will move on. And you can only watch from afar." She turned, her dark hair catching the cold wind, leaving him alone on the courthouse steps. In the car, Hope sat in the back, eyes wide, staring out the window. At 3, she didn't grasp what was happening. Arya glanced at her through the rearview mirror, a new resolve rising. She'd teach Hope that no one defined her worth. She'd grow with the belief that sometimes, the only revenge needed was to live truthfully and become your best self. Brandon watched the car pull away. In that fleeting moment, he felt the distance wasn't just meters, but an entire life, a life he'd lost by his own hand. One April afternoon, Arya's phone buzzed in the True North events office. Hope, 3, played with Legos on the floor, singing a childish tune. An email from a local TV channel appeared, inviting Arya to Voices of Resilience, a show where women shared stories of overcoming crises to rebuild their lives. Arya read it, emotions mixed. Part of her wanted to decline, to avoid dragging the past into the light again, but a stronger part knew this was a chance to turn her story into a beacon for others. She looked at Hope, smiling brightly, and knew silence wasn't an option. On filming day, the studio glowed with lights. The audience, mostly women of all ages, filled the seats. The host introduced Arya, a single mother who turned tragedy into strength, building a career from betrayal's ashes. Applause thundered as Arya stepped out, in a simple navy dress, eyes calm but radiant. She began with a simple truth. 3 years ago, I thought I'd lost everything, but the moment my world collapsed showed me I was stronger than I knew. The room hushed, all eyes on her. Arya spoke of the hospital, the BMW in the lot, the glass window where she saw Brandon and Amanda, and the moment she chose not to let betrayal define her. Each detail wasn't for drama, but to paint the truth. Arya admitted she'd fallen, sobbed on her steering wheel, wanted to vanish. But then I felt my daughter kick, reminding me life wasn't over, that I had to stand for her. She shared gathering evidence, meeting Carol, and the gala night when the truth was unveiled. Some in the audience sighed, others wiped tears. They saw this wasn't just Arya's story, it could be theirs, a friend's, a sister's, a mother's. The strongest part came at the end, when Arya spoke of giving birth. Her voice wavered but held firm. When hope was placed on my chest, I knew the greatest revenge wasn't making someone lose everything. It was rebuilding yourself, living a life the betrayer could never touch. The room stood, applause roaring. Many approached after, hugging Arya, whispering thanks for speaking for them. From that day, Arya wasn't just a businesswoman. She became a voice. Invitations followed, women's conferences, articles, podcasts. Arya spoke not to revisit betrayal, but to stress, "You're stronger than you think. You don't have to accept silence." She didn't sugarcoat her journey, emphasizing real pain, making her recovery believable. At home, Hope began noticing her mother's recognition. She asked innocently, "Mommy, why do people clap for you?" Arya hugged her, saying, "Because Mommy told a true story, and the truth deserves to be heard." One late evening, Arya sat alone in her office, looking out at the glowing city. She recalled stepping into the gala, pregnant, hands trembling with fear. Compared to then, she was a different woman, resilient, confident, free. The past lingered, but it no longer bound her. Arya's fame grew beyond expectations. She wasn't just a single mother rising from ruins. Papers called her the woman who turned betrayal into strength. Women's conferences invited her to speak. True North events became a sought-after brand for turning stories into experiences. The light shone brighter on Arya, making her a symbol of trust and resilience. But that light blinded Brandon. In his rundown apartment, Brandon sat before an old laptop, his haggard face lit by fluorescent glow. On the screen, Arya smiled in an interview. Each word about integrity stabbed his pride. Once, he'd been the star on stage, with her at his side. Now, the roles were reversed, and he couldn't bear it. He began telling the few old friends who still listened that Arya embellished her story, exaggerated for attention. In dingy bars, drunk, he claimed he was the victim, that Arya had painted him as a monster. His words spread like toxic smoke, but lacked the weight to obscure the truth. Not stopping there, Brandon hired a cheap lawyer, filing a countersuit, accusing Arya of defamation and profiting from private matters. He thought dragging her back to court could shake her, pull the spotlight back to him. The lawsuit stirred public buzz. Some were surprised, others skeptical, but most stood with Arya, having seen her undeniable evidence 3 years prior. Carol, like a seasoned general, prepared a counterstrike. She not only gathered old evidence but added new financial reports showing Brandon's inconsistent support payments. The trial opened on a gray, rainy day. Brandon entered in a worn suit, eyes sunken, voice hoarse. He argued before the judge that Arya exploited the media to humiliate him, selling their private life. But his words fell into a cold void. When Carol's turn came, she stood, voice sharp as a blade. The defendant, this man was publicly exposed by his ex-wife and his own law firm, with undeniable evidence. And now, instead of taking responsibility, he tries to twist the truth, desperate to salvage his lost dignity. This isn't a defamation case. It's a futile attempt to manipulate the law. Arya sat behind, calm. She didn't need to say much. Her steady presence, her resolute gaze, answered everything. The judge reviewed the files, then looked up. "Mr. Walker," his voice echoed, "the evidence against you is overwhelming. Your actions only convince this court you're still evading consequences. This lawsuit is dismissed." A firm gavel strike ended Brandon's last faint hope. Outside, rain poured. Brandon stumbled out, suit soaked, steps unsteady. He looked around, seeing reporters swarm Arya, capturing her calm smile. No one noticed him. To them, he was just a failure clinging to ashes. Arya felt no glee. Instead, relief. Not for winning a case, but for proving the truth couldn't be distorted again. Brandon could try dragging her down, but each struggle only sank him deeper into the mire. That evening, back home, Hope ran to hug her mother's legs, holding up a scribbled drawing. A house, a son, 2 figures holding hands. Arya knelt, asking, "Who's this, sweetheart?" Hope replied, "Mommy and me." Her innocent smile proved their family was complete, needing no one else. Arya looked at the drawing, knowing the real battle was over. Brandon had no power over her. The truth stood with her, and more importantly, the future did too for her and Hope. After the final lawsuit was dismissed, Brandon's name faded from headlines. His story became a faint cautionary tale in legal circles, a vivid example of a career burned in one night. While he sank into shadows, Arya stepped into the light. Invitations poured in. A non-profit aiding abused women asked Arya to speak at a national conference. A major corporation invited her for Women and Leadership Day. She received emails from strangers, a single mom in Texas, a middle-aged woman escaping an abusive marriage in Ohio, a young girl grappling with abandonment fears. They wrote, "Your story gave me hope. I see myself in you." Arya realized her story wasn't just hers. It belonged to thousands of women seeking a voice to pull them from darkness. She decided not to stop at single speeches. With Lisa and new partners, Arya founded the Hope Foundation, named for her daughter. Its mission: legal, psychological, and financial support for women betrayed or abused. True North events still grew, but the Hope Foundation became the heart of her personal mission. At the foundation's launch, the hall was packed. Soft light bathed the stage where Arya stood, no longer just a businesswoman, but a community leader. She shared her journey, her voice no longer trembling, free of personal pain. It rang strong. I thought I had two choices: collapse or seek revenge. But there was a third: turn pain into strength to help others avoid my suffering. Applause surged like a wave. Many women stood, tears streaming. Arya saw in their eyes not just empathy, but the resolve she'd found looking in the mirror 3 years ago. Hope, now old enough to sit in the front row, waved and smiled at her mother. She didn't fully understand, but Arya knew one day she would. Her daughter was the spark that made this possible. In the years that followed, the Hope Foundation expanded across states. They ran mentorship programs, built emergency support networks, and partnered with universities to train young female lawyers. Carol, Arya's lawyer, became the foundation's legal advisor. She laughed at a meeting. "When I met you, you were a trembling woman with a stack of evidence. Now you're changing the system." Arya didn't see herself as a hero. She was just a small link, but one that dared to speak, and that rippled further than she'd imagined. At a major New York conference, Arya spoke before thousands. Spotlights shone, cameras broadcasted live nationwide. She said, "Don't let betrayal define you. Don't let silence drown you. You deserve a life built on truth. And when one person stands, thousands find the strength to follow." The room erupted in applause that lingered. Many would remember not for grand words, but for seeing a living testament, a woman betrayed to her core, now leading a movement to empower others. Late that night, in her hotel, Arya looked out at the glittering city. Hope slept peacefully beside her. Arya stroked her daughter's hair, whispering, "You made me a flame, and I'll keep this flame burning for those still lost in the dark." One autumn afternoon, the sky draped in soft gray. Arya's phone rang after a workshop. A hesitant voice said, Brandon, wants to meet you. At the family center." The social worker explained he'd requested an extra supervised visit. Arya nearly declined, but a gut feeling urged her. Maybe this was the final chance to close everything. The familiar visitation room, pale walls, scattered plastic toys. Arya entered, Hope toddling beside her, clutching a cloth doll. Brandon sat there, more worn than ever. His suit was shabby, eyes tired, hair streaked with gray. Seeing his daughter, he gave a faint smile, but it trembled, lifeless. Hope looked at her father with innocent curiosity. She didn't truly know this man beyond the dad adults occasionally mentioned. Arya left Hope with the social worker and sat across from Brandon. The room sank into tense silence, broken only by the clock's ticking. Brandon spoke first, voice hoarse. "Arya, I've lost everything. My job, friends, family. I don't blame anyone but myself. But I need to talk to you one last time." Arya met his eyes, no longer angry, just calm. "Speak." He took a shaky breath. "I was wrong. I know. When everything fell apart, I tried every way to drag you down, because I couldn't stand seeing you rise so strong. But I get it now. You won. You moved on. And I have nothing." His voice broke, choked. "I'm sorry." The late apology echoed in the small room. Arya sat still, listening. A strange feeling rose, not the burning hatred, but a deep sadness, like seeing a collapsed old house. "Brandon," she said slowly, "I don't need your admission or apology anymore. Justice has spoken. I've found my path, and the only thing I care about is Hope growing up in a safe world where truth matters. You chose the wrong path. I can't change that for you." He bowed his head, shoulders trembling. In that moment, Arya saw Brandon not as the betrayer, the two-faced lawyer, just a broken man, prisoner of his own mistakes. And that was the harshest punishment. Hope ran to hug her mother's legs, eyes clear, glancing at her father. Brandon tried to smile, a tear rolling down. "My daughter," he whispered. "I hope one day you'll forgive me." Arya lifted Hope, saying nothing. She knew Hope would grow with the truth, but without the burden of hate. As she left, Arya glanced back at Brandon one last time. The look held no anger, no love, just closure, final. The door clicked shut behind her, and with that soft sound, the past closed too. Outside, autumn wind rustled the trees, golden leaves falling. Arya stepped onto the porch, breathing deeply. Hope giggled in her arms, waving her doll as if bidding farewell to an old world. Arya knew she no longer had to look back. In her heart, there was no gloating, only liberation. She'd survived, stood tall, and now, finally, let go. Brandon would remain a cautionary tale, while she and Hope wrote new chapters bright, full of hope. When the door closed behind Arya, she realized the past no longer held her captive. The pain that once drowned her, the betrayal that nearly broke her all were now just an old chapter. What remained was love. Love for her daughter, and love for herself, for choosing not to let lies define her life. This story isn't just about betrayal. It's about the strength to rise, to rediscover yourself when you think all is lost. But the question lingers. Having rebuilt her life, will Arya find the courage to expand her journey, becoming a voice for thousands of other women? What do you think? Is this the end, or just the first chapter of a greater story? Leave a comment, share your thoughts, and subscribe to catch the next part of this series. Who knows, part 2 might be the story you're waiting for to reclaim your own strength.